Good day, everyone. This is Manal Zainuddin. It is an honor to be speaking today at STEM MENA 2021 with a group of amazing educators and professionals and experts coming from all over the world to share insights with you, highly dedicated and passionate educators who have joined us today in the enhancement of STEM education and to be the real change makers in this 21st century learning era. I always include open-ended questions in my conversations and discussions. And today with this theme, which is highly scientific and academic STEM, I would like to start with 3 open-ended questions. To what extent are we implementing STEM in our schools? Are we fully satisfied with our STEM practices? And do we have ways to make STEM more present and fortifying in our schools? Now, I will ask the questions again at a slower rate, and this time it would be helpful if you just take a few seconds to rate the first 2 on a scale 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest and 10 the highest, and by answering yes or no on the third question. So, to what extent are we implementing STEM in our schools? Are we fully satisfied with our STEM practices? Do we have a way to make STEM more present and fortifying in our schools? So the answers that come to our minds actually are certainly not accurate, considering the short period of time to answer the questions and the lack of enough ample evident data at hand, but they do give us a glimpse about our practices and the STEM scenarios in our schools. Our schools are striving to achieve 21st century education requirements. And this is not a choice anymore, actually. It is more of a demand. It is a requirement. And we all know that we have been putting that in our school vision, mission, objectives, and values, speaking about 21st century education and aspiring to meet all those 21st century requirements. Many schools include STEM as an education program in the school, and they hope that this will direct learners into that mission that they aspire to with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields in the workplace. And leaders and teachers are striving to enhance their practices as well, to show their excellence, to connect all those subjects together, doing projects, doing constructions, even having or conducting fairs, just like science fairs, STEM fairs with their learners. Now, this is good, but it is not enough. And there is also another number, a good number of schools that are categorized or labeled as STEM schools. These are STEM structured schools, and they are mainly STEM targeted. And this is very good, but it may not be always enough because this needs dedication and commitment. Now, today we will be answering these 3 open-ended questions that we just asked, and from the beginning, gradually to the second, until we reach the third, which is, do we have a way to make STEM more present and fortifying in our schools? So when we think about the future of our jobs, there is an interesting report by the World Economic Forum represented in the 2020 Future of Jobs report, and it states all those skills through a figure of the top 10 skills needed in 2025. And going through those skills, we can really notice and easily notice that many of them are at the heart of the STEM fields. When we think about analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, leadership and social influence as well, resilience, etc. Now, this session is about invigorating STEM, exploring its true nature, staring into its dynamism and also into its innovation, because these 2, dynamism and innovation, are desperately needed in this 21st century education now. And this invigoration is not only through the curriculum, not only through the instruction, it is mainly through assessment. the instruction and the curriculum are parts of it, but mainly through assessment. And why is it through assessment? Because it is only through assessment that we can measure, and only when we can measure, then we can record, and only when we can record, we can also analyze, and only when we analyze, then we can improve. And here lies all the magic with all this as it becomes comprehensive. So if schools do not have STEM embedded in their systems, then they are still thinking about instilling STEM. And here there are 3 phases that they can follow. And I will be speaking about these 3 phases thoroughly in the other slides. But just like any system of education, STEM will surely incorporate curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. Now, we all know that all schools already have science, mathematics integrated as subjects, as core subjects. They are highly weighed, especially on the report cards and in the scoring process. So from combination literacy and program to integration, fluency, and sustainability or embeddedness, there is here a clear formula that has to be adhered to if we really want to have it as a full system. And it involves curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment all coming together. Now, the three are important, but assessment is the key that governs the other 2. And in other words, we cannot evaluate the first 2 without the third. And that's so important. And assessment here, it is mainly conducted for learning first and of learning second. And this is very critical because unfortunately, most of the schools do it the opposite way. They start first to do assessment of learning and then for learning. And this is not the right way if we want assessment to guide our learning. So when assessment is conducted effectively, actually, it invigorates learning. And in this case here, STEM education. So as we observe, again, the second bullet list here, integration can lead to fluency, and both can lead to sustainability. Now, that's why skipping one has a very negative impact on the overall process. And needless to say, when we integrate our experiences, integrating experiences by nature creates opportunities for innovation and creativity, and this is highly needed in our 21st century for our learners and our systems as well. So we cannot continue through the mundane way. And this is a very important message through this presentation today. We have to be versatile. We need versatility more than ever if we want to stir curiosity in our children, if we want to stir creativity, and even also in our teachers as well. So this is what revives a school program, school project, or a school system, when both learners and teachers are truly invigorated and are truly encouraged to take it further. So knowing now the nature of STEM, we come to 3 questions actually, as we plan to invigorate STEM in our systems. So what are we assessing, and how will we assess, and how do we know that we are assessing in the most effective way? Because remember that we don't want to waste time just going into all those processes. So as we explore each question thoroughly here, it's critical that we continue to keep the nature of STEM in our perspective. So first question is, what can we assess? And while we all know that what cannot be clearly identified cannot be measured and cannot be assessed. So what are we assessing? And first here we have to identify what we have to assess in order to conduct an improvement plan for the system. So here we are not only looking at curriculum and pedagogy, but also at factors that influence the entire process and the achievement at the end. So in this case here, what we assess is both of academic and non-academic nature. And whatever those, the ones listed here are not part of our practices, then definitely we need to redesign our programs and our practices. And I need to point out a very important remark here, which is there is a difference between assessment and evaluation. We do not mean evaluating the entire system here. We mean assessing our practices mainly the curriculum and pedagogy as we go through in the process. So starting with the academic aspect here, and we definitely have to look at subjects in isolation or in separation. Now, if students are not proficient in STEM subjects, and here we mean in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, then we cannot expect them to be proficient in STEM fields. And here we speak about standards as those that are not the core. And we have to explain this because some think that the standards are the core. Well, they are not. They only direct the teachers so that they can reach their outcomes. It's in the doing. It's the teaching that gives value to the standards. So the standards cannot stand all by themselves. And here, of course, I will resort to questioning so that we can reflect and evaluate our practices. So are we assessing here mathematics, science, biology, chemistry, physics, and all those subjects, also environmental science, for example? Our requirements, our standards as per the nature of each subject. And here it's important to consider the procedural fluency rather than just assessing conceptual understanding. Are we assessing also the evidence-based arguments? Are we assessing our claim evidence reasoning, the CER? Are we assessing the tools and the strategies that we are using in our STEM classes? Are we assessing our success criteria so that the scores that we are recording truly reflect the progress needed for STEM? Are we assessing how technology is taught? Because it has its standards too. And we all know that it's not just computer literacy. And unfortunately, this is a misunderstanding by most of school systems, that it's just computer literacy. It's also coding. We can find, for example, in the American system, there are American system standards through the Computer Science Teachers Association, which is the CSTA, or also the ISTE, the International Society for Technology in Education. We can also find computing as a computer subject in the British system schools. And we can also find it in Germany as well, designed by Hubweiser 2013 as the PCK, or Informatique Pedagogical Content Knowledge. And for example, in New Zealand, etc. So there are standards. We cannot say that there are no standards. So we can search for our standards accordingly. Are we assessing how engineering is also incorporated in our schools? And also engineering, it has its standards as well through the ITEA, or International Technology Engineering Educators Association. So here we are moving, after thinking about our subjects in isolation, we move towards subjects in integration. And here are we handling or navigating through those subjects in an integrative learning environment. And of course, here we mean the coherence among the disciplines. And this is very important. For example, in the standards for technological and engineering literacy, the STEL, they provide those integrative standards. Are we assessing the effectiveness of our project-based learning? And STEM education, it highly relies on project-based learning. Are we also assessing our planning and execution in class and out of class, and in school and out of school activities? We can give assessments on all of those practices. Are we assessing also our computational tools and our methods used in all subjects? And again, I say in all subjects. So when we really think about our curriculum, we have to think about rigorous curriculum, about the depth of our learning. So are we assessing the way our learners are interacting with subject matter? For example, depth of knowledge, or the DOK, is an excellent tool to do that. Are we also assessing the way our learners are interacting with each other, and are we considering their learners' cognitive activities? So are we extending time so that they can do this, or they can experience what we call the productive struggle, instead of just us giving answers or telling someone to give them an answer, like their peers? Are we assessing our lesson information and structures here? When we prepare our lesson plans, are we including the computational skills to other subjects as well? Because this will help develop problem-solving skills. And it's important to know that, and I write about this in many of my resources, that computational tools are not restricted to IT teachers. There are basic strategies that can be given to all teachers. And this here, of course, recommends it recommends professional development? Are we assessing also our personalized teaching and learning processes? Because this is what will make our curricula rigorous. And thinking about the academic factor, also we think about competencies, and here mainly 21st century skills that align with STEM skills. And of course, they are the critical thing: problem solving, leadership, collaboration, decision making, social emotional rigor as well, communication, public speaking, self-efficacy, agility, responsibility, collective responsibility, etc. Are we assessing the level of confidence with which our children are handling all those subjects? And here the Mind Research Institute actually defines this as the cycle of rigorous learning, which reflects on the excitement of the learners, because when they are excited, then they are not afraid of failing. They are not afraid to take further steps. And that's how we and they can see the bigger picture. And this is what we all aspire in learning, to see the bigger picture. Are we assessing the level of motivation that allows creating high level of thinking skills in all those STEM disciplines? Because motivation is very important. Without motivation, we cannot expect our learners to be deeply involved in their activities. And are we assessing also the level of equity among our learners and teachers? And I write actually more about this 21st century competencies, and I encourage you to check on my website. There are 2 blog posts. Blog 1, generic skills generating thrust, and the second blog is 21st century learning, O.R.B.I.T.S model, O.R.B.I.T.S model. It shows how we can have all those 4 facets brought together equally in order to produce a learner competent for the 21st century workplace and life as well. So, of course, this is just a quick selection of the disciplines and pedagogical approaches. I'm sure that other fellow speakers will be speaking about all this, so I will just leave that to them. But thinking or going further to the non-academic aspects, to those non-academic facets, and here mainly we have 2, which is lack of interest in STEM education. And this is mainly because STEM is always viewed as a scientific subject, and that it is limited to a certain category of educators and even learners. So here are we assessing the interest of learners K-12 in our STEM disciplines, to know the reasons why they are not interested and to see how we can modify that accordingly. For example, we have learners who lose their self-confidence and their self-interest mainly because they had a negative learning experience. And many of our learners have gone through that. We as learners have gone through that. But in 2014, 2015, Duncan and Topi researches, they state that proving a positive experience can help instill this interest and confidence. Are we assessing also the interest of teachers K-12 in STEM? Because this is another conflict we are facing. In 2016, 24 interviews were conducted with teachers, asking them about the reason why they are not much interested in being a STEM educator, and most of them listed the being unexperienced, feeling lack of adequacy, and also of computer and science background, and limited also professional development resources. And this is where the role of leaders come. So are we assessing also the way we are handling this lack of interest? Here we speak also about the mindset. And in the International Journal of Education, there is a very important paper that states how when we move from the negative to the positive, from the passive to the active, then we are ready to be what they called ideal learner. And that is actually worth trying, which is the growth mindset. And also one of the other non-academic aspects is the gender inequalities, and mainly this relates to girl and women. Are we assessing the way we are approaching our female learners and female teachers so that we can understand their fears? insecurities as well, and other challenges. Unfortunately, in some schools, they even, or boys and male teachers boast about their scientific background and their mathematical abilities in front of the girls, and this is not encouraging. This will become an impediment for those girls and women. And UNICEF has been working hard on that in 2020, and they issued a report about that, mainly about girls, stating that it's only 18% of the women who are students in tertiary institutions throughout the world who are targeting STEM education. And this is really alarming. That's why we are all mustering our efforts to encourage girls and women to be part of the scientific, in this scientific domain. So when we move forward to the second question, again, we keep nature of STEM in the background and we ask, how will we assess? Well, and we all know that to make assessment efficient, assessment tools and strategies are needed as part of STEM development plan. We need the tools to do that. And at the same time, we need to provide professional development for teachers on how to assess. And this becomes a whole school process. Now, there is some interesting data that we will share from TIMSS 2019, and we can easily here, if we look deeply into that, we can easily see the higher percentages of students by teachers indicating a need for PD, and this is really alarming. So when we think of STEM education or STEM development plan, we need those sources of data, the quantitative and the qualitative researches. These tools, those strategies, those feedback loops, and working on STEM professional development projects and programs as well. And that's how we go from a phase to another. So starting first with the intervention phase. And here mainly, if we are piloting the STEM in our schools, if we are just starting it, design or even redesigning the current one. So this is so important that we have all the facets put together. When we bring all this effective and successful input and output, structure them properly and set them for embeddedness. So here, what we mean is that they are not random. And this is so important. When we start preparing through that intervention phase, we are thinking of STEM committees, and those must be initiated to work on pre-assessing, planning, executing, evaluating respectively. And then for those subjects of course of isolation and those of integration, we are conducting assessment continuously as formative and summative, so that leadership can keep track of the progress of both learners and teachers. And again, I say both learners and teachers. It is never learners only. Teachers and learners can also know their progress and achievements, their deficits of areas of improvement, there is also a need for proper funding. It should be provided, such as digital libraries, digital labs, as well as virtual museums, science centers, learner workshops, immersive learning environments, etc. Creating also PLCs, which is training those teachers, training leaders, training teachers. It is an integral part of this intervention as well, because this is the first phase, which is leading the path to the second phase. And also we consider throughout this intervention phase as well the feedback loops. And this is so important because this will communicate any successful practice and any unsuccessful practice or challenge as well. So here the feedback can be qualitative, can be quantitative. We can have those formative tests, and we can have the summative tests as well, and how they can show the progress of the learners in alignment with the standards that we have. We are using rubrics, we're using surveys and general observations, and all this data, of course, can be collected. It can be made credible and valid also, despite its complexity sometimes, but we can handle that out and shared also within those meetings, those conferences, to ensure that whatever is noted, whatever is marked or recorded is not biased, because that's another important aspect that we have to think about. And another thing is that once we bring all this information and feedback all collected, there should be those immediate responses. And remember, we are still in the intervention phase, because we cannot wait until another scenario emerges. because if it's late, then the gaps will become very difficult to reduce or even, and of course, to close. So the responses here should be based on evidence, again, not randomly selected, not even just created, because some schools, they just create data, unfortunately, and that's something that is totally unprofessional, and we really have to take responsibility and be accountable for that. The second is the capacity building phase, and this is the second phase after the intervention. Here, we have already set our basis for our plan, and now we are scaling up our professional learning communities with our PLCs, and PLCs are very important because they offer opportunities for this connection, for this collaboration, and of course, for better planning for this integration. And here we have to mention the research assessment. And something very interesting that I like to mention is the what is called creative pedagogy, founded by Dr. Andrei Aleinakov. This concept depends on the requirements of the society, and now we know that our society is changing rapidly. That's why PLCs are fundamental, because they can work on this creative pedagogy concept. Also, it's important in this capacity building to acknowledge successes, because here, after the intervention phase, so much work has been done. Now we have to seek empowerment of both teachers and learners, to pursue empowerment of both teachers and learners. And while those successes are acknowledged, we are still conducting assessments. So it still goes parallel with the assessment, because this process should never stop. And the third one is redirecting our practices, our errors of practices. So here we mean that we are turning those errors into correct practices. But again, we have to use different tools, including technology-based solutions, because now we are very lucky in these late 5 years with all this advancement, and I'm sure that we are heading towards more advancement in technology-based solutions, which we can use to make those changes possible. And the third phase, which is the sustainability and embeddedness phase, which is here, we are assuring the coherence within those disciplines. And now we can say that the path is well built, it is well structured, and now we have STEM system built within our school. And of course, with sustainability and embeddedness comes growth mindset. We have created a positive mindset, and we continue to work on it so it can help boost creativity. Because we all know that with negative mindsets, with a negative environment in the school, creativity will simply be extinguished. No matter how hard we have worked in the previous two phases, if we do not continue working on our mindset, having those positive practices and positive attitude, then it will not be possible. Computational thinking, which is so important as well, it's a core thinking skill. It helps children try to find solutions. And when children find solutions, they will become more confident, and they will become more ready to move forward. And this is part also of the design process. So if we ask ourselves now, how are we assessing? So what are those tools and strategies? Now, the tools and strategies are definitely infinite, as they depend upon our creativity, and every school and every educational system has its own way to do that. But I'm including here some of the tools and strategies. Some can be numerical, of course, and others are non-numerical, the quantitative and the qualitative ones. We know that quantitative must be administered according to a plan, so that our data analysis is periodically recorded and analyzed. Now, with qualitative research, we are still collecting information, but for what cannot be measured with numbers. So we have to be careful about that, because this involves opinions, it involves reasons, interests, motivations. But this is very important because it supports our quantitative research. So, for example, examples of quantitative data is like tests, quizzes, exit slips, rubrics that are mainly based on scoring, self-marking quizzes on projects, benchmark tests, diagnostics like 2 minutes the subject check, summarizing, personalized tests and quizzes, HOT, higher order thinking question of the day, and other personalized methods. And the qualitative one with the surveys, questionnaires, checklists, and inventories, constructions and crafts, focus groups, reviews, consensus models, feedback pipelines, sketching, interviews, and of course, being, for example, scientist, mathematician, activity, when we are targeting here to the same discipline. And of course, we have to mention that these tools and strategies can be done during online learning. So it's not an excuse that we say that it might not be possible. So coming to the third question here, and how do we know that we are conducting assessment in the most effective way? Now, to ensure that STEM is built in our culture, we have to do the right assessment and evaluation. And here we are checking whether we have attained our goals and our degree of success. So we may have identified the material for assessment. For example, we chose whether we wanted to be the qualitative or the quantitative. We have designed the plans for the execution of the assessments, what time to give, where, the venue, whatever it is. However, these two processes may not succeed. So here, that's why it's important to do evaluation. Here we are collecting the data from all this analysis, from all the assessments that we did. We are aligning them with our success criteria. We are stating also our assurances. All this is very integral in the evaluation of assessments of STEM fields. And any decision must be well studied. So here we talk about data-based or research-based decisions, because this is the only way that this decision is the suitable decision. So other significant success agents as well are consistency and transparency. And this is another a huge impediment in school systems, because just like any improvement plan, it cannot be sporadic, it cannot be occasional. It has to be an ongoing pursuit of for better assessment, for continuous improvement, having those productive, continuous PD sessions and activities, having these extra support, interventions, mentoring, coaching as well, all types of collaborations, also partnerships. So in a study in 2017 in New Zealand, 13 novice teachers, beginners, they practiced computational thinking in a very systematic manner by filling some kind of feedback. And after filling those feedbacks, after every session they taught, they discovered ways that could help them identify the methodologies for integrating computational thinking. And they were developing and improving. And of course, as they did that, they were also gaining self-confidence. And that's so important for teachers, especially when they are handling such a complex theme like STEM. So the evaluation plans as well are better be designed for more than just 1 year, a minimum of 2 years, because I personally do 5-year evaluation plans in most of my quality consulting, because, and even previously as a director, because this helps, keeps track of whatever progress that is being made, and whatever errors have to be reduced and modified as well. And schools that want to be really STEM focused or STEM certified, because we know that some schools would love to have those STEM certificates, then they are advised to do that, to have a minimum of 2 to 5 evaluation plans. And data analysis systems here can help track the performance. And when the plan is 2+ years, then more accuracy, of course, and efficiency are achieved. And of course, this will yield those remarkable results that we all aspire. It's also important to know that as STEM schools, we have to keep track of the latest researches, because STEM is mainly science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we know that the 4 of these are continuously evolving and tremendously being enhanced. So here, it's important that the leaders bring forth all those guides to the teachers, so that the teachers can work and be updated with whatever new information there is. And when all those practices become school-wide, then we can say that STEM is embedded. We can say here that the assessment that we have done has helped us remain on the right path. It directed our teaching and learning. It also redesigned our curriculum. It covered all the subjects, including the non-subjects, because also STEM can be integrated in non-STEM subjects to emphasize here its whole impact. So here, this is how we are solidifying the positive efforts. We are also highlighting the strengths for more motivation and grit. And that's why I personally love to have STEM in the school, because STEM makes the school community more dynamic and more creative and innovative. So there are, however, certain challenges, and whether locally or globally, they still exist, and we have to address them if we really want to have a faster improvement in our STEM education. And there are still conflicts between theory and research and practice. We all know that, and even between practice and authentic achievement. And here it depends from school to another, but here now we are today here to speak about all this and how to make it really effective and authentic. So we need assessment to invigorate STEM. And however, there are still factors that influence our assessment directly and indirectly. If our standards, for example, are not accurately identified, we will not know what to assess. Now, during COVID, it's even harder. It was harder. Now, I hope that everybody tried to settle within their disciplines, but with the less teaching hours, when the online learning started, that was a problem, and we all had to redesign our standards. Standards were redesigned in most education systems to prioritize and to evade, of course, more learning losses. And it's important to notice here that standards are not fixed here, and they are not fixed, they can be changed, but they have to be focused on core learning goals. So once we identify our core learning goals, then things will be much easier. So also we have to think about our teachers. Teachers are the change agents for STEM embracing schools. And Finland is the best example in its professionalization of teaching. And we have heard Andreas Schleicher, the director of OCD, speaking about that. The teachers must be trained to use inquiry themselves and problem solving in their lessons. And here in our 21st century, particularly in 2021, we still have the same problem. The majority of teachers around the world still do not use inquiry and problem solving appropriately in their lessons. And the other point is that leaders also full presence, full guidance, full support are highly urged. And we cannot have highly motivated teachers without leaders pushing them forward, showing that they themselves are enthusiastic. When the leaders are enthusiastic, they can inspire teachers as well. And we know that now economy relies on STEM fields, and it is the responsibility of us all. And then again, in the Chalice video study in 2020, teachers who displayed better classroom management and social emotional support also of students predicted personal interest and self-efficacy in mathematics. And also it showed in half of the countries and economies. So while training learners to score higher here, we might as well train teachers, even on social emotional skills as well, because this is highly recommended. Another powerful factor is assessment management. And here we talk about a committee, a head of assessment to facilitate if the teachers are not yet equipped with the right tools and methodologies. And this is very possible in most of the schools, especially in the early stages. So here they will find it different from just having those score-oriented high-stake tests, because in STEM, this is not what we are targeting. We are targeting hands-on learning. So skills tested here need to be different from the typical ones, those that are fact-based, and we need to focus more on rigorous tasks that aligns with our new educational expectations. And the last point here is, or the point before the last, is the costs. Costs also influence STEP implementation. Unfortunately, not all schools can afford this kind of improvement. That's why assessment here can assist in its diversity to play its role, to see how further we can take STEM in our school, depending on our budget. And here, another attribute for STEM is also flexibility. So here, schools with lower budget can still implement it and later upgrade it. I have seen that in many schools. I was in a school as well where I've seen, and I have worked together with the school on a low budget to produce a STEM system in the school, and it was highly successful. So budget is not mainly a huge impediment. Now, also the disrupted learning caused by COVID, and as it was shown in OECD's latest researches in science, technology, and innovation in the time of COVID, actually were deeply affected due to lockdowns and social distancing. Now, also the research and development in investments as well have decreased noticeably. And this depends upon territories, but it still existed. It affected gender as well. Female researchers, for example, during two lockdowns and work from home, they had to look over their children and elderly. So that's when they had to kind of withdraw from their tasks, academic tasks. And that's why we have to call that STEM community has to act in order to at least draw this bridge between what has happened and what is going to happen in the future. So one more persisting challenge as well is that there are misconceptions about STEM, which I find very important to mention here, so that schools start to take those constructive steps toward the full understanding of STEM. And first is that STEM should not be a burden. Many schools think that STEM education is an additional program, and by adding this program, this will affect their other subjects as well. Again, they are working in separation, isolation, and not integration. Another reason is it's considered to be the scientific domain as well. So it's restricted to schools that target or that are scientifically oriented. Now, the same applies also to learners and teachers. Those learners who say, I do not like math or I do not like science, then they withdraw from STEM. And this is also a tremendous misconception and hindrance for us from having those STEM-focused schools. Something else is that STEM is not about one specific subject, one specific textbook, or one specific plan or curriculum or class. It is a process. And that's where it becomes so exciting when it's designed by school. And this will serve also the uniqueness of the school. So here it's a model, it's weaved into teaching and learning, and each school can be creative in the way it presents this model. And this model fosters mainly depth of those STEM disciplines of innovation and of collaboration in this 21st century. Also, STEM does not have to be taught and assessed to all learners in the same way. And this is so much interesting because it offers opportunities to be creative. This supports personalized learning. It's so important that teachers are also well trained to diversify and personalize their activities by allowing children to do that. Unfortunately, and I've seen that in so many classes, when teachers will always redirect children to the same activity that everyone else is doing. Who knows if this child was gifted or talented, what could he or she has done. So that's why here we have to speak about this, because we want our learners to become self-directed. And also STEM is not about robotics, about artificial intelligence and construction through blocks like Legos, for example. STEM is much more than that. It can also integrate nature as well. And here I call upon educators actually to consider maintaining balance in the characters of our children by incorporating nature and natural material in our STEM activities, especially in urban places. This is part of my O.R.B.I.T.S approach, as I call for conscious learning and being. Children and adults are overwhelmed now with this daily technology, and we need to give more space to nature. So we can do those STEM projects in the class. We can bring those natural elements inside our class. We can go out and have this STEM. Of course, here in this case, it will not incorporate technology, but this is okay because we really need to maintain and achieve harmony and balance. And in this way here, we are doing those double learning when you are targeting your scientific domains. At the same time, you're targeting nature and our natural world, which is our core and our essence. And I call upon you to check one of the very interesting episodes of my podcast where we speak with one of the nature artists about incorporating STEM and nature in the system itself. So I think now we can also think about STEM culture and how to enrich this culture and help it thrive. We have to address also certain areas. Now, we have the chance to use technology in recording assessment for learning and assessment of learning and analyzing it. And that's why now when we use those general models during our science inquiry, using design programs as engineering, it makes assessments quicker and more accurate. And we have lots of digital tools to use for this purpose. The other point is that without training teachers and leaders for STEM programs, we cannot expect much success. And here, if we really want to draw attention also for teachers to be encouraged for recruitment as well in STEM field jobs, then we have to ensure that they will be well trained. Also, attainment needs to be addressed from the early years because science and mathematics are highly cumulative, as we all know. And these two subjects necessitate deep thinking, and which mainly needs also deep teaching. So we notice that many children still lack so much general science knowledge. And that's why when we encourage our learners from early stages to explore those scientific fields through reading, through fun activities, through projects, a science day or a math day or whatever that is, will massively foster the scientific power. One more thing also is consulting STEM experts in fields and doing those community service, inviting those STEM guest professionals, agreement with certain STEM universities for some shared programs. This is really so important. I can give an example like the MIT Open Learning, the College Board also developed an AP STEM Access program. And one of the most rewarding steps also for ensuring quality in STEM is becoming a STEM certified school or accredited school. And through international accreditation, the school becomes much more valid in whatever program or system it embeds. And here I can give examples like Cognia, which is the American International Global Accreditation. And for example, the National Institute for STEM USA, STEM Learning UK, and of course also in Germany with MINT as well. So schools can manage its system education programs and it can ensure this quality and excellence. And there is also a good number of STEM support organizations and centers here in the Middle East and all around the world. So thinking about all this, bringing this together to meet certain success criteria, it's highly advisable to select those STEM practices that suit our school community. And it's so important to know that it's not about competing. And I personally find this interesting because unfortunately, when leaders think about embedding STEM, most of the time it's for competing purposes. STEM is about progressing and adding value to your inner and outer community. And when we assess our practices accurately here and equally and consistently using the qualitative, quantitative methods in a balanced manner, then we are guiding our STEM curriculum and pedagogy. We can also ensure that contingency plans are always available and scalable for periods of crisis such as COVID. And we have all seen what happened when all the fields and policymakers were struggling to navigate through the pandemic. Now we are amid recovering and we are still making those effective strides to stabilize our education, our health systems, our economy as well. So we need to make smart decisions. That's why we need to have assessment for STEM properly to build a strong foundation that can accelerate all this future recovery. And one more thing is that you need to reward your community for every small or big achievement that they do, because this incorporating STEM in the school is very challenging and meticulous. It requires lots of work and hard work from everybody. It makes a huge difference when we love what we do. So when we start to revive this positive, this loving energy in whatever we are doing, then this is when we can achieve those results, when we build this positive, high achieving community. And we also think, for example, of UNESCO in one of its sites and philosophy of the STEM education STEM is considered as instrumental to ensure a fair, inclusive, and harmonized society. So it's not only the economy that we are targeting here, it's also our well-being. So yes, it is time now to be held accountable. And starting with ourselves, it's time now to start thinking. We cannot ignore the limits of time and effort. We cannot continue giving excuses. Assessment helps us monitor our teaching and learning, which when done effectively will revitalize STEM communities, and then we can expand them better. So ending up with our driving questions, and it's important to keep these questions alive. To what extent are we implementing STEM in our schools? Are we fully satisfied with our STEM practices? Do we now have ways to make STEM more present and fortifying in our schools? Thank you.